There is a truth in science that is so integral to what we do, we don't even think about it. It just is. And yet outside of the laboratory, it's relatively unknown. It's almost become a secret, an unintended secret, and one I didn't even realize existed until I was talking with my friend Anna. Anna is a biochemist and a mom. And she was at a school event, and she overheard some parents having a pretty heated discussion about how to make heart-smart choices for their family when it comes to butter or margarine. Butter is bad. They tell us butter is bad, we need to use margarine. Then margarine is bad, you need to use this new margarine. And now there's a rumor that butter really isn't even that bad for us. Why can't they give us a straight answer? Why can't they just tell us the truth? And she realized they didn't know the truth. Because the truth is, there is no such thing as truth in science. Science is not about truth. Science is not about searching for some immutable truth. It is not a quest where you find something and you take it and you put it up on a shelf and you say, aha, we found it, we're done, yay. In fact, if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. Science is about knowledge. And knowledge flows. Knowledge moves. Knowledge changes. It's kind of like going kayaking on the river. Where you were an hour ago is not where you are right now. And where you're going to be in a couple of hours, well, that's part of the adventure. For me, this became clear when I was a graduate student back in the 80s. And I was studying the human immune system and a process called inflammation. Now, every one of you here has experienced inflammation. If you're lucky, you've experienced it in the heat, the swelling, the pain of a sprained ankle, or a cut that's got kind of gross and nasty. But after a week or so, it's gone, and you don't even think about it. If you're unlucky, it's the pain in joints, in arthritis that just don't move. It's lungs that won't breathe in asthma. It's insides that feel like they're on the outside in Crohn's disease or colitis. These chronic inflammatory diseases strike so many of us. And we wanted to know more about how they worked. At the heart of many of these chronic diseases are your own white blood cells. White blood cells, as their name implies, are in your blood. They're running around in the bloodstream. But when something happens, when there's a cut, when there's an infection, they have to stop right on the vessel wall. They have to grab hold, and then they have to crawl and move. They find places in the blood vessel to push through and get into the tissue. And in the case of an infection, they're looking for bacteria to get rid of. In the case of chronic inflammatory disease, they're wreaking havoc. So we wanted to study this process. We took white blood cells, got our hands on a few. We got some of the cells that line the blood vessel. We put them together, and we asked the question, how do they stick to each other? How do they bind? And we learned a lot. We identified different molecules and different proteins that mediated some of that adhesion. We found out how they crawl, how they find bacteria, how they seek, how they destroy. But we kind of missed something. Blood flows. And if your blood ain't flowing, chronic inflammation is not your biggest problem. It's called a blood stream for a reason. And just ask anybody. Try to pull a kayak out of a lake, get on shore, no problem. But if you're in the middle of the river in a swift current and you've got to get to shore, it's a whole other ballgame. And that's what your white blood cells face. So we changed the way we did our experiments. We started looking at these interactions under the flow conditions that you find in the bloodstream. And what we found is that mix of molecules, those different proteins, each one had a specific job at a specific place at a specific time, And this organization, this hierarchy of interaction was important. As the years went forward, we identified new targets that led to new therapeutics that even now are being used to treat some of these chronic inflammatory diseases. It changed our world. That knowledge that we had before served us well as we moved forward and we watched things change. Now, flash forward about 8 months ago, my colleague, Paul Koobs, down the hall, is looking, using new technology, into the living, breathing lung. And now we're asking, what are cells doing there? And what we found? Tipped over the apple cart again. It's a completely different kettle of fish. The lung is weird. Things are happening that we never expected. The dogmas, the paradigms, it's all new. And it's exciting, and it's thrilling, and it's going to open the door to understanding chronic lung disease even more. That knowledge from before is going to serve us as we go forward. This is one of the reasons why it is really hard to pin down a scientist. Go ahead, ask a scientist a yes or no question. I dare you. What you'll hear is, well, maybe, sometimes, under certain conditions, within certain parameters. It's not that we're trying to fool you. It's not that we're trying to weasel our way out of something. It's not that we're trying to mislead. It's just the way we think. This is how our world is. This is our job, to think about what the possibility is, what's around that bend. But it can be kind of chaotic, and it can be a bit of a challenge. Well, the good news is there are paths in this river that we know pretty well, that we've traveled quite well. Smoking? Bad for you. Gravity? Works. Exercise? Every day. But there are a lot of things that are changing. There are a lot of things that we have hit the rapids. We're moving very quickly, and it's changing all the time. So what can you do? How can you navigate this environment? Well, the first thing I challenge you to do when thinking about science is take those words, what is true, take them and throw them away. Instead, ask us, what do we know? And scientists are not always the best at telling our stories, but what we can do is work harder to tell those stories better. And both researchers and the public together need to understand that when there's a really exciting finding, when there's something that is just breaking the news, that when the media reports this, it's a snapshot. It's a single moment. It's a point of interest on the river. It's not the journey. It's not the whole story. And in fact, if it's a really big finding, it means that there is something really exciting happening right around that corner. So the other thing that you can do is that the things that you care about, the things that are important to you, check in with us on a regular basis. Ask us what we know. Join us on that journey, because you have important decisions to make for yourself and for your families. And the more you know, the better those decisions will be. Thank you.